Hey there friends and neighbors, Bobby here today. Hey folks, today we have a 2001 Ford Explorer Sport Trac. And the problem with this vehicle today is it has a thermostat housing that's leaking. This vehicle has a Ford overhead cam 4.0 liter engine in it. And these engines are bad about this little thermostat housing here leaking. Now this is our brand new one and we're going to install this today. Now let's go down here on the engine right quick and I'll show you about where this thing is located at. If you'll see my finger, this housing is actually underneath this intake manifold. Now we're going to try to sneak it out of there without taking the intake off today. We're going to take our air tube off and our thermostat and our throttle body, and hopefully we'll be able to gain enough access, so stay tuned. Okay friends, the first thing we're going to do is remove this air intake tube here. And we have two clamps here. We're going to loosen that with our 3/8 cordless impact, and then we should be able to just pull this thing out of place. Okay friends, next thing we're going to do is take this throttle body off, and there's four 8mm headed bolts that we're going to take loose with our cordless, and we're also going to take loose this linkage bracket right here. There's two down here on the bottom. Now with all your bolts removed, you can simply just lay your throttle body out of the way. You just kind of lay it on top of the intake right here. Okay friends, now next thing we're going to do is take our pair of pliers and just squeeze this little clamp here holding this upper radiator hose until it clicks into place. And then you can go ahead and pull your radiator hose off. Now we do have our catch pan underneath our engine. We got a big old 55-gallon drum catch pan to catch any coolant that may fall while doing this operation. Okay folks, the next piece we're going to be taking off is this upper thermostat housing here. It's got 3 bolts that holds it on, and you should be able to get a straight ratchet and a socket on the first two here. And for the back one, let's see, these two here break loose. Should be able to spin them all the way out. Use like a ratchet wrench. It should be able to reach right back in here and go ahead and break that one loose and bring it all the way out. Okay friends, I got the thermostat housing off of there, but this wiring harness was definitely kind of in my way, and it's probably going to be in my way pulling this thing out of here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and disconnect the negative side of the battery so I can disconnect this harness from the alternator. And it's just a plug in and then probably a 10mm to disconnect it from the alternator. So let's go ahead and do that right quick. Okay, now with this electrical harness going to the alternator disconnected, we can kind of lay it out of our way, hopefully here. So it's kind of out of our way. Now the next thing that we're going to be working on, there's a hose going into the top of this housing. We're going to take our pair of pliers, we're going to squeeze this little clamp and remove this hose here. And then there's a hose down here, this bypass hose that has a clamp, same type of clamp. We're going to squeeze it and disconnect it, move the clamp down a little bit. And then there's 3 bolts with a 8mm head on them that we're going to have to loosen these and get them out of there. We should be able to maybe use a swivel socket on most of them. If need be, we may use the ratchet wrench, but we need to get them 3 bolts disconnected, and then we should be able to pull this housing out of here. Okay friends, this little 8mm swivel, you will need to pull 2 of the 3 bolts that hold this thermostat housing in place. You definitely need that little swivel. And once you get that loose and you take loose your bypass hose here, now what makes life a little bit easier, if you'll go ahead and take the tension off of the cert belt and pull this one pulley here off that mounts right here where my middle finger is, this will make life a little bit easier. And then once you get it loose from the bypass hose, which we are going to replace that bypass hose, you can pull it up a little bit, and at that point go ahead and disconnect both of these connectors. There's a gray connector and a red connector. Go ahead and disconnect it at that point, so when you go back together, before you set it in place, you want to plug them back up. Now also, one out of the 3 bolts, the one at the back, you'll have to leave it in place. Okay, so when you go back together with the new piece, you need to go ahead and put that bolt back in place. as you work it in. Now if you'll be careful, you can wiggle and work this piece right out through the front here without taking off the intake manifold. So there we go. Okay friends, this here is the bypass hose I was talking about. We're going to go ahead and remove this from down here at the, looks like the water pump. We're going to replace it, and we're going to put 2 worm clamps on it instead of these crazy spring clamps. And right here, this flange right here, where the thermostat housing mounts, this surface here needs to be cleaned up real good so that the new one will seal up against there properly. And then, so we're going to go ahead and work on that and put our new hose in place. And then we will slide our new part here into place, and we'll just reverse the procedure of removal, and we'll get this thing back together, and then we'll show you how we filled up the coolant and get it all bled out. Okay folks, hey, we're done with our little thermostat housing replacement project, and if you'll bring the camera right over here, we can see that we've got our new housing installed. Everything's back together. We've got a new bypass hose on. Everything's hooked up and looking pretty good. Now we're going to let this thing sit overnight. I'm going to put coolant in it tomorrow, and I'll simply fill it up right here at the radiator, and we'll let it, we'll crank it up and run it and fill it and let it circulate. We'll make sure that the thermostat is opening, and we'll do that by checking the temperature of this hose coming out. When it gets nice and hot, we'll know our thermostat is open, and we'll keep circulating, and we'll run the heat and everything and make sure we got the right amount of coolant in the system. Friends, I want to thank you for watching the video today. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.